So the idea that you would politicise science, which is meant to be about reason, objectivity, pursuing the evidence, setting up a question and then seeking the answers to it, are you in effect saying that science can be distorted to suit political ends and is being distorted to that end?
Well, my interest was in science being stopped or slowed for political ends. So when it comes to the study of gender differences, there have been activists or advocates in the academy who have said that to study any of the differences between men and women is a sexist thing to do. Just merely asking the question is a sexist question. Now, from my point of view, all questions should be allowed to be asked. There is no such thing as a question that can't be asked. So it was very problematic to me to think about science being stopped or halted for political or moral reasons. And that's a underlying theme of Quillette. We're very much about open inquiry and defending open inquiry and allowing people to ask any questions that they want to ask.
You mentioned that you were not interested in a sort of postmodernist lens for looking at the world.
Yeah.
Now, postmodernism sort of has certainly taken over in the latter part of the last century and up to now in terms of the way that we see things. What does it mean to you, though, to say that you don't want to see the world through a postmodernist lens?
Well, I consider myself to be a positivist. That is, I believe there is such a thing as objective reality. We can discover it with the scientific method. There is such a thing as reality. I view the postmodernist or post-structuralist philosophy as, it's hard to characterize simply, but they question the idea that there is such a thing as objective truth. Language shapes reality. One can't discover truth through the scientific method. And that to me does not help us understand more about the world. It doesn't help us navigate towards the future. And I think it creates more confusion than clarity. And so I'm all about using the methodologies and the epistemologies that help us understand the world and seek a better future rather than creating chaos and confusion, which is what I think postmodernism does.
I heard someone say recently that ambivalence in language is the postmodernist's best friend.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to have a rational debate if you consistently move the meaning of words around so that no one knows what the rules are anymore.
Yeah, and we see this, there are all sorts of language games that are played, and there's a phenomenon called concept creep where the definition of a word changes over time and you don't know what definition you're using anymore. So once upon a time, the definition of racism or sexism was to discriminate against someone, a person of colour, or just to discriminate against a woman. Now, the terms mean something quite different. I gave a speech last year at the Centre for Independent Studies where I read a few abstracts from papers from a discipline called critical race theory, in which they argue that ignoring someone's skin colour and treating people the same is itself racist. So the meanings of the words have been completely inverted, but it's the same word. And so it creates all of this chaos and confusion because you never know what people are actually referring to. And there are all of these kind of competing and conflicting meanings, and it's a mess.
Some of the words that are bandied around a lot now seem to have meanings attached to them that are almost impossible to me. Diversity is one, inclusiveness is another one.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't seem to mean real diversity at all.
That's right, absolutely.
And you're only included if you actually fit the mindset of the people who are advocating that inclusiveness.
Yeah, diversity is an interesting one because it doesn't mean diversity of thought. It often doesn't mean diversity of class or socioeconomic status. It means diversity in how you look. But it's often used as just like a catch-all word to mean all of the things that are supposed to be good, without any real precision about what people actually mean by that word.
The interesting thing is that a lot of these social agitators would say that they are following in the footsteps of the civil rights movement in America. So you go back to Martin Luther King, and because he was saying, I don't want my children to be judged by the colour of their skin. I want them to be judged by the content of their character. It seems to me that this idea that somehow or other a lot of the social activism that we see today is following in the noble footsteps of that movement, really pretty superficial.
I think that's completely wrong. I think Martin Luther King was an inheritor of the Enlightenment, and he, like the early feminists like Mary Wollstonecraft, just wanted to extend Enlightenment principles of equality of opportunity to Black people in America, and that's what Mary Wollstonecraft wanted to do for women, just extending equality before the law, equality of opportunity to groups who had been overlooked throughout history. What we're seeing now is a rejection of Enlightenment principles. It's not about equality of opportunity. It's identity politics is about ranking people in a hierarchy.
Yeah, a new aristocracy.
Exactly, which is it's medieval in a way, because it rejects the Enlightenment that everyone is created equal. And the problem with identity politics, whether it's white nationalist identity politics or grievance-based sort of racial, anti-Western identity politics, is that it ranks people. People are not considered equal. They're either given status according to their victimhood, or they're given status according to some kind of inherited skin tone. It's completely regressive, and it harks back to pre-Enlightenment days.
It seems to me that it's very important that we try and expose this wherever we can, because again, to go back to that era, it's not so very long ago in the scale of human history that at the same time as Martin Luther was talking like that, you had Kennedy saying, I know they're hackneyed, but ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We've turned that on its head. We've turned the idea of citizenship, or we've largely rejected it, I think, because in the name of identity politics, we now say, you've been mistreated.
Yeah.
You have things that you are rightly aggrieved about, even if you hadn't heard about them, and your country owes you.
Yeah.
And the problem with it is that I wonder whether victimhood, being a victim, is ever a really good place to be.
Well, certainly not psychologically. So psychologists will tell you, Jordan Peterson's famous example of a psychologist explaining that having a victimhood mentality is bad for one's agency, sense of agency and purpose. But it's a tradition. It's been known for decades in psychology that to internalize a victimhood identity is very bad for one's own functioning in the world, and it should be avoided. And the problem is that we've got these political movements which are encouraging mindsets that are known to be harmful, and among young people.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there, and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.